Hello, and thank you for joining us to celebrate Asian American, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander Heritage Month with this timely discussion on the crucial role of the AANHPI vote in our 2024 election. Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islanders have been active participants in democracy, and their stories and contributions are both part of American history and current American life. This next hour, we'll explore the historical context and current trends of Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander democratic participation, including voter engagement, and highlighting the diverse perspectives and experiences within the community on electoral outcomes, both nationally and in key communities and battleground states. We'll discuss real solutions to the key issues that resonate with AANHPI voters, ranging from education and healthcare to immigration and economic justice. My name is Mary Catherine Ricker. I'm Executive Director of the Albert Shanker Institute, and it is our absolute pleasure to host tonight's conversation. And it's my privilege for us to begin by introducing a video from Congresswoman Judy Chu. She represents California's 28th Congressional District and is the chair of the Congressional Asian Pacific American Caucus. Here are Congressman Chu's opening remarks for us.
Happy Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander Heritage Month. I am Congressmember Judy Chu from California's 28th District and the chair of the Congressional Asian Pacific American Caucus, or what we call CAPAC. I am honored to participate in today's event, even though I cannot be there with you in person. I want to express my appreciation to AFT and ASI, especially AFT's fearless president and ASI board president, Randy Weingarten, ASI executive director, Mary Catherine Ricker, and ASI board member and AFT's AAPI task force chair, Jessica Tang, for hosting this incredible panel. For the past several election cycles, we have seen a record increase in voter turnout among AANHPIs. In 2018, Asian Americans had the highest midterm turnout gain of any group, a 14-point increase. In 2020, Native Hawaiians and Pacific Islanders saw the highest increase in presidential turnout among any racial group, and almost 60% of the Asian American citizen age voting population turned out. And during that same year, in battleground states such as Arizona, Georgia, Nevada, North Carolina, and Pennsylvania, the number of Asian Americans who cast their ballot exceeded the presidential margin of victory. There is even greater potential for an increase in voting power as Asian Americans have become one of the fastest growing racial or ethnic groups in the United States over the past 2 decades. That is why I often say that AANHPIs have gone from being marginalized to being the margin of victory. These remarkable strides were a result of robust organizing by leaders and organizations like APIA Vote. They have made voting more accessible by translating materials into over a dozen different languages, from Chinese to Chamorro, training young people on college campuses to organize a vote, and running a voter protection hotline that provides language assistance to voters every election cycle. With these measures, campaigns can realize the full potential of the AANHPI vote and can be victorious. By courting AANHPI voters and listening to the issues that matter most to us, there is so much to gain for the candidates and causes we care about. But there are still so many states that are going backwards, enacting new voter restrictions that may threaten our gains. Since 2020, 19 states, including Georgia and Texas, have attempted to enact new restrictions on voting access. Many of these restrictions limit early voting and voting by mail, which half of Asian American voters prefer using. These restrictions will have a disproportionate impact on the AANHPI community and other communities of color. It's important to continue to push back against these laws in the courts and against the enactment of new voting restrictions across the nation in Congress and state legislatures. Creating a system where every voter can safely, easily, and securely cast a ballot means we build an America that works for everyone. CAPAC also supports legislation to strengthen our voting systems and voting rights, like the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, to help protect AANHPI and all communities' right to vote in the future. So I truly appreciate the conversation you are having today. I thank the panelists for their tireless efforts working with CAPAC and AANHPIs across the country to uplift our community's voices and mobilize our collective power. Thank you again for inviting me to join you today.
Thank you so much again to Congresswoman Judy Chu for that great message, the incredible history she offered, as well as what we're facing right now. I think she sets up this conversation really, really well. Next, it is my absolute privilege to invite a member of the Shanker Institute Board of Directors and AFT Executive Vice President, Evelyn De Jesus, to also offer some remarks. Evelyn, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Mary Catherine. Thank you, my sister. And thank you and happy Asian American Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander Heritage Month, everyone. I just want to tell you that Randy was going to be with you, but she is delayed in flight. She's been canceled. So it was very important that her and I say some greetings and really let you know that we love you and we're just so proud of you guys. So this is such a timely discussion. You hear background at the White House and just filling in with some stuff here, so don't mind the noise. So like I said before, this is a timely discussion, and May is an opportunity to uplift the contributions of the more than 24 million. When I read these data, it was 24 million of AAN HPIs in the United States who have been active participants in democracy, and their stories and contributions are both part of the American history and current American life. And I just want to take a point of personal privilege to thank Kent Wong to make me so aware of all the research that he has done. So I'm with you, my brother. And AFT has long, as you know, recognized the importance of the diverse communities within our union. In July of 2020, at our convention, our president, Randy Weingarten, announced the formation of an AAPI task force, and I am the presiding officer responsible for supporting this dynamic task force. The mission of the AFT's Asian American and Pacific Islander Task Force is to raise the visibility of urgent issues impacting AAPI members and their communities. Issues like the rise of anti-Asian racism, including vicious attempts to blame Chinese Americans for the coronavirus pandemic, and the need for more culturally relevant books that reflect the AAN HPI lived experience. As you well know, the AFT's AAPI task force also provides national leadership in addressing these issues wherever AFT members live and work, in schools and in public institutions, hospitals, colleges, and universities. And of course, to provide leadership in civic engagement as well. Like you heard from Representative Judy Chu, and like you will hear from our incredible panel shortly. Across access to vote is crucial to the Asian American Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander community, and the stakes couldn't be higher this year. The Biden administration has been an important partner in so many of the issues we face, making record investments in public education, forging student debt, and pushing for teachers to get a raise, as you heard in his speech. Even if folks don't agree with the president, everything, we understand that. I think they recognize that he is a good and decent human being, and that he's in this to help others and build the economy from the bottom up and the middle out. 4 more years of President Trump only helps Donald Trump. So make no mistake, brothers and sisters, elections do matter, which means politics matter. Politics is a means to an end to help turn our aspirations from a good life into our reality. It's not a destination in itself. You know, who knows the importance of politics. our adversary. They spend millions and millions of dollars in politics trying to get their way. Fox and Friends throw so much shade that many of our members don't want to get into the fray. This is intentional. The tool of our aristocrats is not just power, but apathy. But we can't sit on the sidelines because the stakes in this election couldn't be higher and the contrast couldn't be clearer. The question in 2024 is not just who will help us achieve our dreams and keep growing our labor movement. That's it. The question is 2024 is whether democracy, whether labor rights, whether public education, and the AANHI vote will be a decisive vote from national to local races. And we must do everything in our power to create welcoming communities as well. That's why it's so important to me that we have a strong and diverse labor movement. As you well know, everyone that knows me knows I live that, because lifting up the voices of our members is our union's work. Standing with AA and HPI community to stop Asian hate is our union's work. And standing alongside our community when they experience the devastating scourges of gun violence, like last year's Lunar New Year celebration in Half Moon Bay, both in California, within days of each other, is our union's work. Teaching our full history and not hiding from it, like the history of Japanese intermittent camps, is our union's work. When we work meaningfully, side by side, as we have been doing, to make sure our Asian American, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander community is seen and heard and safe, we pave the way for even greater civic participation and a more robust democracy. So I'm so grateful to work alongside these leaders. You are going to hear from today, and I'm so excited to see the power of the Asian American, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander community in this upcoming election, in our civic life, and in our leadership. I thank you. I am so proud of you. We see you, we hear you, we live with you, and we believe in you. So have a great panel and have a great night. Thank you so much. And thank you, my sister, Mary Catherine, for having me.
Evelyn, it is my absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you even more for everything you do to lift up and support workers everywhere, including what you are more than likely doing tonight at the White House. So it is wonderful to have you join us. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me. Have a great night tonight. Good luck.
Thank you. Now it is my pleasure to introduce our panel for tonight. Please welcome first Christine Chen, who is the Executive Director of AAPI Votes. Next, I'd like to welcome Kent Wong. He is the Project Director for Labor and Community Partnerships at the UCLA Labor Center. He's also a member of the AFT AAPI Task Force, and he's Vice President of the California Federation of Teachers and founding president of the Asian Pacific American Labor Alliance. Welcome, Christine and Kent. And finally, I'd like to introduce our moderator, Jessica Tang. Jessica is president of AFT Massachusetts. She is co-chair of the AFT AAPI Task Force. She's a vice president of AFT, and she's a board member on the Albert Schenker Institute. Jessica, it's wonderful to have you here tonight too. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you so much, Mary Catherine. And, just want to appreciate you all for putting this together as well. I know for myself, as an Asian American growing up first in Ohio, then Pennsylvania, and then New Jersey, that it was oftentimes a very lonely place. To be like the only Asian American in the classroom, to never actually have an AAPI educator myself until college, to never learn about Asian American history or AAPI or NHPI history. And so it means a lot when we have the opportunities like this to have visibility, because that's something that oftentimes we in the AA and NHPI community struggle with. And so, you know, even being the first Asian American as the president of the Boston Teachers Union, and now of AFT Massachusetts, I still actually struggle with some of those issues. I'm oftentimes still the only Asian American in the room, oftentimes not just the only Asian American, but also a young woman or a queer person or a young leader. And it can be sometimes tough because there's a sense sometimes of imposter syndrome. Like, you know, if I'm looking around the room and no one else looks like me, you know, do I belong here? But if I had maybe a stronger community and more visibility and opportunities that I think we're creating now for the future generations, maybe that wouldn't be so much the case. So I'm really, really excited to be able to moderate this panel with Christine and Kent, who are doing the work in so many ways and honestly inspirations to me. And I've learned so much from both of them. And so it's truly an honor just to be able to be in conversation with you all. You know, we know what some of the solutions are at AFT. You know, we know that we need to advocate for ethnic studies, for inclusive API history, culturally relevant books. We also know, again, that educator diversity is so important and including more API educators. I purposely, for example, wanted to teach in a school with AAPI students because I knew that they may not have one if I wasn't there. And so I looked for that opportunity. But there are, again, still too many API students who feel overlooked and invisible. And so that's why we need to elect more ANHPIs into the office, like Rep. Chu. We need to expand representation. We need to make sure our votes count. And again, this conversation is so important, not just to our community, but to the larger goal of democracy, right? And it's one of the ANHPI community is one of the fastest growing and most diverse groups in the US. And so we're going to hear tonight from, again, two very, very knowledgeable people who've been doing this work for, you know, I want to say decades, actually, I don't want, you know, yeah, so to kick us off, Christine, the first question for you is, what's at stake for the AAPI community in the November elections?
Yeah, well, thank you so much to AFT for hosting this conversation, and everyone here for your leadership. You know, maybe before we actually talk it in terms of what's at stake in terms of the issues, I also want to level set in terms of where the API community is at and where there's opportunities where we really can collaborate with AFT and really make an impact on these elections. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and to really focus first what we've seen in terms of since 2020 with the US Census. First of all, there's so much opportunity because the Asian American and Pacific Islander has really grown by double digits in all 49 states and Washington, D.C. The only state that did not was actually Hawaii, where we're already a majority in that state. What that means is that we're also seeing this growth of the population translate in terms of those who are getting eligible to be registered and to actually turn out to vote, right? But also before that, we saw that with the growth, when we saw the reapportionment process go through, the API population actually helped prevent additional congressional seats being lost in places like California, Illinois, Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, New York, but also in places where they gained, like Oregon, Colorado, Texas, North Carolina, and Florida. We are seeing vibrant organizations and communities growing in those areas and also getting organized. So for API Vote, we actually believe in building political power by increasing voter participation and civic participation among the AANHPI communities by investing in local nonprofits and trusted messengers in these states, so that way they can actually have the capacity to actually do this work. Especially in the last decade with these investments and trainings, we've seen slowly that we've been able to increase the voter registration and turnout. Especially from 2016 to 2020, we saw a plus 10% increase, which is a larger increase than any other community. And it's really great to see that, because before 2020, I used to say only half of our family and friends were ready to register and turn out. And then how did that actually translate in 2020 and where the opportunities look like as we go into 2024? Want to go ahead and focus on, some of these presidential battleground states, right? As a reminder, what was the margin of victory in 2020? The number of APIs who voted in 2020, especially in Nevada and in Georgia, where we over-index. And I think a lot of people underestimated the API electorate at that particular point, but that actually helped in terms of our turnout actually helped in terms of the ultimate win for those states. And the other area I really want to focus on is the API first-time voters. In states like Nevada, 25%, Georgia, 26%, we're seeing huge growth of the API first-time voters. But what that actually also means is that we need to do more education in terms of what are the differences between the Democrat and Republican parties, the different candidates. Also, what is the process? How do they make their plan to vote? We know in 2022 that 73% of Asian American voters opted to vote early or by mail. So that's actually larger than any other ethnic community. So we know we need to do this work early, and it actually makes sense because 28% of our community are actually limited English proficient. So when you're able to access a mail-in ballot, to sit at home with your family and friends, speak in your own language, to really process what's on the ballot, it makes sense for them to actually opt to actually vote early or by mail. And then the last area I want to point out, the last column, is our predicted citizen voting age population. Because of the growth and the numbers of APIs that are becoming US citizens, we have so much opportunity to utilize these numbers if we actively engage and reach out to them to get them registered and also to turn out as well. So hopefully that will give you a basic understanding in terms of where this electorate is at. But overall, I also want to point out in terms of also young voters, right? So US born Asians are typically younger than their foreign counterparts. So what that means is that if you're an American born Asian who's 18 to 24 years old, 60% of them are Gen Z or younger. Right. And so that's something we need to realize, where when we're looking at the growth of this community, it also means about engaging young voters in itself. And overall, in terms of issues, we've seen in our past polling and also some additional polling that's been happening lately is that jobs and economy continue to be a top of mind for our communities, which is, also includes is inflation, but also access to healthcare and also crime and safety. I think, many of us are still dealing with the scars of the 2020 cycle, where we saw the rise of anti-Asian hate and the ramifications of that. And so feeling safe and feeling like, what can we do and where are the policies and where are the issues that can actually help us making sure that our communities are safe, that we're providing a diverse education system. Those are things that are going to resonate with the API electorate.
Great. Thank you. And that's actually, a great segue into a question for Kent about the rise in anti-Asian hate over the past years and how that's impacted the AIPA community. So can you speak a little bit more to that?
Thank you, Jessica. Just wanted to once again give a shout out to my good friend Mary Catherine Ricker and the Albert Shanker Institute. And it's so great to be together again with my good friends Jessica and Christine, who have done such extraordinary work as leaders within the API community. The reality is that that politics matter, that this is a crucial few months leading up to the presidential election, leading up to who controls the House of Representatives and who controls the US Senate. And the huge growth in the API workforce and the voting electorate means that our community can play a decisive role if we roll up our sleeves and get to work and mobilize our communities to turn out to vote. And when I say politics matters, we saw the horrendous impact of the framing of the COVID-19 virus as the Kung flu, as the China virus. We saw a huge spike in anti-Asian hate crimes and anti-Asian violence. And a lot of people assume that this was a recent phenomenon, when in fact, this has been part of the history and landscape of Asian and Pacific Americans throughout the beginning of time, throughout the first Asian immigrants coming to this country, and since the passage of the first racially restrictive immigration law back in 1882, the Chinese Exclusion Act, and the ramifications are being felt to this day. So we have seen a tremendous resurgence of organizing, of activism within the Asian Pacific American community to respond to anti-Asian hate and violence, and especially among young people. And at the same time, we really need to point to the role of the Donald Trump administration, the right-wing racist Republican Party. Let us be very clear. The Republican Party is dominated by white supremacists, by racists who advocate racial bias and racial discrimination and racial hate. You hear it in the Trump language. You hear it in the leadership of the Republicans in the Senate and in the House of Representatives. So when we're talking about anti-Asian hate, let us be very clear that it is coming from Trump, his allies, and the leadership of the Republican Party. And that is a huge threat to the safety and security of Asian Pacific Islanders throughout the country.
Thank you, Kent. Another big issue that has come up is the lack of immigration reform as being a topic of major concern for the AAPI community. How do you think we could advance immigration reform today, and how might that be an issue to bring out voters as well?
So the reality is that we've heard the statistics, 24 million Asian Americans, Native Hawaiians, Pacific Islanders residing in the United States. The reality as well is that the vast majority are immigrants. We have a higher percentage of immigrants even than the Latino community. And the issue of immigration, the issue of family reunification, the issue of our undocumented immigrant youth, these are critical issues to the AAPI community. And once again, we see hateful rhetoric around securing the border, around anti-immigrant policies, around stripping the right of Chinese nationals to own property in various states in this country, which is a throwback to some of the horrendous anti-Asian policies that were embraced over 100 years ago. So I think that on the national scene, we have seen, unfortunately, a bipartisan failure in advancing immigration reform. And we have seen time and again promises unkept with regard to immigration reform. And we need to push for immigration reform and for just and humane immigration policies. I think that our approach now must be to focus more on states where we can actually secure meaningful immigration reform. And California, in many ways, is taking the lead. California has secured healthcare access for 2 million undocumented immigrants. And currently, pending before the California State Legislature, is an initiative, Assembly Bill 2586, which would secure employment rights for undocumented immigrant students in all 3 levels of higher education, at the community college, at the California State University, and at the University of California. This would be a national breakthrough to secure job rights for undocumented immigrants that we contend is permissible by law. So we need to keep the heat on both parties with regard to immigration reform. We need to fight at a state level to secure meaningful immigrant rights victories, such as the ones that we have secured here in California. And we need to continue to build a grassroots national movement for immigration reform, for justice, and for equality.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I would say that, you know, the New York 3 special election race is actually a great example, because when Suozzi ultimately won the support of the Asian American community, because he was also able to address immigration, also in regards to a more comprehensive look, right? Because our community family reunification is very important. And so he was able to also address, like, if he was elected, what he would also do. So we really need to make sure that immigration is not hidden away, but we actually continue to bring this up with these candidates and talk about it in this election cycle.
So, Christine, are there other critical issues you think that are impacting AAPI communities today that we should also be elevating and highlighting?
Right. When we talk to our local partners, what we're hearing from the ground is that there's a lot more interest in terms of voting when we're focusing on local issues, ballot initiatives, and also down ballot races, right? Because it's closer to home. People could actually feel and understand how that actually can impact them, right? So I think as it gets closer to the fall election, there's definitely still needs to be a lot more education in terms of what's at stake when it comes to the federal elections. But in terms of what's driving it, it really is about local issues. So for instance, what Kent had mentioned, these alien land laws, what we've seen is that new Chinese immigrants that in the past were not organized or taking an interest in organizing for the elections, because they've been battling the alien land laws in Texas and Florida and Louisiana and Georgia, right? They're now coming to us asking, like, what's the best way that we could plug in? How do we actually organize and making sure that our voice is heard? Because they know that probably after this November election, the state legislative bodies will also pick up this issue once again. And so they want to demonstrate their political muscle in hopes of hindering that as well. The other thing is, once again, as I mentioned, the scars of the 2020 and the anti-Asian hate, a lot of our community has turned toward their energy in increasing the passage of API or ethnic studies curriculum, right? And so I think that's also another area of interest for this community that we can actually get them, because they actually organized around these policy issues, that now it's about translating that into the power of their vote. Now, with younger voters, we also know that gun control and the environment are also still top of mind, especially when you look at the past experience of how we were actually impacted in Monterey Park, as well as Texas, more recently in terms of gun control. But then all you have to do is turn on the news every day, and you're seeing what is happening with the environment. We're reminded day in and day out how we're actually impacted as well.
Thank you. How about you, Kent? Do you have thoughts on how we can effectively mobilize the API vote?
Well, I was very glad that Christine led by talking about the most critical issue impacting not only the API community, but workers across the board, is jobs and the economy. And I know that we're in a 501c3 space, and I want to make sure that we are not violating the terms of that. However, I do think that it is important to recognize the stark differences from the pro-corporate, anti-union, anti-worker policies advanced by the Trump administration versus the extraordinary work of the Biden administration to grow jobs, extraordinary low unemployment rates, and massive infrastructure funding to grow our economy. And I do think that this issue of jobs and the economy are critical, because the reality is that even during the pandemic, we saw extraordinary corporate greed. We saw corporations making record profits. And we have seen in the last couple of years an extraordinary rise of union organizing, and many campaigns of workers who had previously never been a member of a union are now forming and joining unions in record numbers. And many of those campaigns are being led by API and other workers of color and young workers. So as we look at the demographic shifts, we see tremendous hope with regard to a next generation of young workers who have no illusions about corporate America taking care of young workers. They never have, and they never will, without a fight and a demand for union recognition and for union rights, so that we can secure a decent wage and decent benefits for working people. It is obscene, a level of corporate greed. And let us be very clear that Trump not only has the base of support of many white supremacists who he cultivates and encourages, he also has support from many of the corporate elite who benefit from the financial policies that the Trump administration advanced, which included regressive tax policies, gutting public social services, and attacking unions and workers. That is what the extreme right-wing Trump agenda is all about. And that's why the API community can play a critical role in preparing for the November elections to make sure that we elect candidates who represent the interests of the API community and working class communities as a whole.
Thank you for bringing that up, Kent, because we also know that we are stronger when workers and organized labor are working with our community-based organizations to advance AAPI community interests. And so I know that's something we think a lot about at APALA, which is the Asian Pacific American Labor Alliance, which Kent helped to found and was the founding president of. And that work continues today. So what advice do you have on how we can strengthen the community labor alliances so that we can continue to also advance the larger AAPI community interest and issues?
Well, let us be very clear that Joe Biden won the presidential election based on the support from the labor movement, from communities of color, and from young workers. That was the winning coalition that secured his victory. And it is critical in the coming months that we invest heavily in those very constituents that will deliver victory in November. And so we need to focus resources in building labor and community alliances that will target union households, that will target communities of color, and that will target young voters. That is the winning coalition. And unfortunately, historically, there has been a major struggle to invest in communities of color. And that's why I'm so thrilled about Christine's work with AAPI Vote. And I'm so thrilled about the work of the Asian Pacific American Labor Alliance, which is mobilizing its chapters across the country to forge those very labor community alliances so that we can turn out union households and that we can turn out communities of color. That is the winning coalition.
Thank you. Christine, you want to add to that?
Yeah, I just also want to acknowledge that, for API Vote, when we were first an idea back in 1996, when I was at the Organization on Chinese Americans, it was because of the leadership at APALA that we actually realized is like, you know what? We've never had a national campaign to turn out our community around voter registration and education and GOTV. And it's really been because of looking at the structure and the programs at APALA and within the union base that we really learned best practices and tried and refined it, and to actually be able to deliver what we had been in terms of the growth that we've seen in the last decade. So I just really also want to make sure and acknowledge the role that labor has played in terms of the development that you've seen and the growth from this community. But it's true, we still need more investments. We also need to also recognize that when you're looking for the winning number to win your campaign, that needs to include the AANHPI electorate and what that actually looks like. And so and I'll put this in the chat under apivote.org/research, we have state-specific fact sheets. So that way, if you're looking to figure out how to build in the API electorate into your field plan, we actually have data about what counties we actually reside in, what languages we actually are speaking in, where the largest Asian ethnic populations. So that way, you know how to target and engage this community directly. It's only when we're able to making sure that we translate and provide culturally competent engagement that we're able to, actually engage and actually are able to mobilize this particular community. That's why API Vote, even back in 2022, we invested resources to reach 1 million households with translated mail. that meant 33 different versions, 16 different languages, 18 different states, right? But it was great because then our local partners followed up with phone banking and text banking for those that had the capacity to do digital ads. And then we actually followed with in-language digital ads by geofencing certain areas like Asian grocery stores and things like that. And because it was in language, we saw larger engagement on those digital ads. And then also when our mail landed back in 2020, we received thousands of phone calls on our 888 API Vote hotline, where you could ask and get assistance in language in actually 8 different languages.
All right, so what about the voters who are maybe disillusioned, or, you talked about the young voters, our communities of color, and our, worker labor movement voters. What would you say to the API voters in any of those 3 communities, and some of us are in all of them, right? That are disillusioned. They're not happy about the direction of various issues that are going on right now. And, I don't even have to name them. I think we all know what's on our mind. What would you say to them?
I do think that this is going to be a critical election, and the future of democracy is at stake. Donald Trump has made it very clear his intentions if he is allowed a second 4 years in the White House. And this is a very dangerous threat to democracy. It is a threat to communities of color. It is a threat to women's rights and the right of choice. It is a threat to immigrants. It is a threat to unions. It is a threat to workers. So I know that there is a lot of dissatisfaction nationally. I know that there's an extraordinary rise of a new student movement that is absolutely calling for peace and a ceasefire in the Middle East. And at the same time, we need to focus on mobilizing the vote to secure the future of our democracy. And whether we can turn people out on local, statewide, or national elections, we need to turn out the vote. There are issues in every single state that have impact on the lives of the API community. There are elected officials running in states across the country where the choice could not be more clear. The Republican Party has been taken over by an extreme small group of diehard reactionary white supremacists. They are shamelessly embracing an agenda of white supremacy that is going to do irreparable harm to the API community and to other communities of color. This is a direct threat to our safety and to our future. We know what the consequence of the Trump administration played with regard to the rise in anti-Asian hate. You can double down on to be assured that if he gets another 4 years, it's going to be off the rails. So yes, there is a lot of concern. There's a lot of valid criticisms of the current administration. At the same time, now is the time for us to mobilize labor and community alliances and turn out the vote to secure our democracy.
And if anyone wants to see what the playbook actually does look like, all you have to do is Google the Heritage Foundation Project 2025, right? And this is where we need to expand the conversation to, even though we know a lot of the younger electorate is focusing on maybe a single issue right now, but it is about what is at stake ultimately. It is about our Americans' fundamental rights and freedoms. So if you think that after this election, are you voting in someone that will allow you to continue to actually have those freedoms to be able to protest and to advocate, right? Because right now, a lot of what's outlined in that Project 2025, they're looking to ban abortion and IVF. They're looking to roll back protections for LGBTQ people, they're looking at removing elements from curriculum that is seen as too woke. There's just so many things outlined in that document that will actually change the fundamental way of what we can actually be able to participate in this democracy. So it is really about recognizing, yes, people's concerns and what may drive them ultimately, or what their interests, but then also to expand their knowledge in terms of what is at stake. And then also to be aware of how mis and disinformation may be playing out in terms of how they're consuming this data, this information, and whether or not the narratives that they're hearing are actually true or not.
Thank you. So we're fired up. We know that there's a lot at stake. We know that the choices matter for our election. So what do we do to plug in? What if, we're like, yeah, I get it. All right. I know the election's important now, but what do? I don't even know how to get involved or, make a difference besides my one vote. What advice do you all have for folks who might be just, all right, I think I'm getting there. I'm beginning to realize I really do need to take some action and do something. So what is that something that you would recommend? Either one of you.
There are more opportunities now than ever before to get involved. And whether that is at your workplace, whether that is in your community, whether that is at your place of worship, there are places where you can get involved to build community and to organize to create change. We see millions and millions of young people in this country who are organizing, who are forming and joining unions in Starbucks, in fast food restaurants, among Uber and Lyft drivers. We see an extraordinary wave of organizing on college campuses. We see graduate students and undergraduate students forming unions that never before existed, launching strikes and securing extraordinary victories at the bargaining table because of the collective power of workers. We see communities of color mobilizing and organizing for ethnic studies, for the affirmation of the collective experiences of communities of color that is now being threatened and under attack. This whole attack on critical race theory, this whole attack on ethnic studies, it's a way of promoting a very dangerous white supremacist agenda represented by the leadership of the Republican Party and represented by the #1 racist in America today, Donald Trump. So, a lot is at stake, and whether people choose to focus their energies on the national election is not the #1 priority. The #1 priority is to get involved, organize wherever you can, to get involved, to turn out the vote at a local, at a statewide level, because on every single one of those levels, there are issues that will impact our future. So please connect with the Asian Pacific American Labor Alliance, connect with the American Federation of Teachers, connect with AAPI Vote, connect with the Albert Shanker Institute. We are all ready, willing, and able to accept volunteers and to partner with you to create the change that we need.
And I would also say, just don't forget the power that you have among your own family and friends, right? There are many folks that we need to have those difficult conversations, right? Because once again, we need to protect our loved ones from all this mis and disinformation that's going to only increase as we head into that fall election cycle. And so the more that we can actually engage with them to actually understand how, what is at stake, how it's going to impact them now, then hopefully we're going to prevent them from falling into that trap of mis and disinformation.
Thanks. So are there any other resources or websites or upcoming events that you want to share that, because we're starting to wind down here with our time, that any of our viewers can look into to learn more or to get more information about any of the topics that you all have talked about tonight?
Yes.
We posted a lot of the websites in the chat. Please feel free to click on them to connect with us, to find ways of getting involved. Together, there is tremendous power in the API community. The API community can be decisive in swing districts throughout the country and in enacting policies that will advance the collective interests of the API community, of communities of color, and of all workers in this country.
And I also placed in the chat apivote.org/research. Like I said, that's where you could find data about our state fact sheets. Our new polling data for 2024 will be coming out in July. And then we also have monthly polling seminars with AP NORC surveys that you can also plug into there. But I also would like to invite all of you, where Apala is also a member of our host committee for our presidential town hall. This is an event that we actually organize once every 4 years, starting in 2008, where we bring national and local API organizations together to build an audience of 1,800 community leaders, also encompassing all the battleground states, and where we ask the presidential candidates and nominees and their campaigns to come and address the community and answer questions, because this is the only platform where we're able to engage with them and to actually get the answers that we need here for them to actually win our vote. So please join us July 13th in Philadelphia, PA. For that. And then on the 11th and 12th, on that Thursday and Friday, we're also going to be hosting free workshops and plenaries to really understand how we could connect with one another in each of these different states and learn from each other best practices to turn out the vote.
Awesome. Thank you. So that's all in the chat as well. And Mary Catherine also shared the Educating for Democratic Citizenship community on Share My Lesson. Share My Lesson also has a ton of resources just for educators who want to, again, teach a lot of the history that's not often taught about NIPI communities. And so that's a great resource. Colorine Colorado is also another resource. And what I love about Colorine Colorado is that it has a lot of bilingual resources for parents and different Asian American languages as well. And actually on that point, what might you say about our, multilingual get out the vote efforts? Are there specific places where that's happening, where if someone is multilingual, they can actually use that skill, because it's important to reach a lot of our voters, as you had mentioned, who might feel more comfortable talking about some of these issues in a different native language. So do you have thoughts on that?
Definitely. So in 29 states, we actually have local partners who are implementing voter registration, voter ed GOTV programs, and we need volunteers that are multilingual, as well as those who are not. But also, in addition to the direct voter engagement programs that we are implementing in language, we also implement the 888 API Vote Hotline. So you could be based anywhere around the country and volunteer and it'll be live for the first 4 weeks leading up to the elections. So we need volunteers to be able to answer phone calls, answer questions from the voters themselves.
And what if I've never done that before though?
We will actually train everyone. We are really good. We've been doing this for over a decade. And so we are, as long as you're bilingual, we even have cheat sheets in terms of terminology, in terms of elections, because we understand that when you're fluent, sometimes you're not necessarily fluent in election terminology, but we also have those type of cheat sheets as well.
Awesome. And Kent, were you going to say something as well?
Wanted to go back to the whole theme of forging labor and community alliances and how this is going to be decisive in securing victory in the November elections. That there is a vast network within the Asian Pacific American community. There's a vast network of Asian American media resources. And by and large, the journalists for those TV, radio, and print newspapers are very community-oriented and very progressive. And so they want to hear more about what is being done to forge labor and community alliances and what is being done to make a difference in the AAPI community. So I do think that building labor community alliances needs to engage our young people, needs to engage our college students, needs to engage our community-based organizations, including those in the API media.
All right. That was a lot to think about. and a lot of really great information and resources that were shared. And so really appreciate you both taking time out of your evenings to just share the deep well of knowledge that you all have. Do you have any last thoughts for us before we close out? Any final messages?
Really wanted to give a shout out to the three extraordinary women who helped put this together. Mary Catherine Ricker is doing great work at the Albert Shanker Institute and is such a powerful partner. Jessica Tang not only has been the head of the Boston Teachers Union, head of now a statewide leadership role in the Massachusetts Teachers Union, but she's also the chair of the AAPI task force of the American Federation of Teachers. And Christine Chen, you have done such extraordinary work over many, many years. We in the AAPI community owe a great debt of gratitude to you and to the work of AAPI Vote.
Thank you. And we can't forget Kent, for always being the mentor and the leader for, several decades for many of us, and really, continue to be there throughout these years, and always being a thoughtful leader that's always willing to reach out to that next generation and to mentor them, and to always be really strategic in terms of really giving advice in terms of what we need to do to continue to move forward. So thank you, Kent.
Thank you all.
Thank you to both of you. I started the panel by just sharing a little bit of how lonely it was for me growing up in a place where there were not a lot of people who looked like me. Again, it wasn't until adulthood that I really started learning about my own history and identity, and meeting people like you and reading about people like Grace Lee Boggs right behind me has really been truly inspirational. And you all give me so much hope about what is possible. So I just wanted to, again, appreciate you all for the work you do. We know that education and democracy go hand in hand, but democracy thrives when it actually reflects the true diversity of all of America's people, right? And each one of us really does have such a significant role in safeguarding that really just fundamental principle of democracy. And for the Asian American, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander community, our votes really do matter. They cannot be taken for granted. And we also have responsibility to help get out that vote. So thank you all so much for this really important conversation. We all, again, cannot take democracy for granted either. And we have to do the work to reaffirm a democracy that is inclusive, that is equitable, and that is representative of all of us. And so thank you all for joining. Thank you all again for sharing your wisdom. Thank you, Mary Catherine and team, and to AFT as well.
Thank you, Jessica, Kent, Christine. You clearly tonight let us know what the crucial role of the Asian American, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander vote is going to be in the 2024 election, and just even more so, just the deeper and the rich community and contributions that we need to continue learning about. There are a whole host of resources in the chat. We will also share them on the Shanker Institute website. So where you'll find this video as well as all these other resources that you shared. Your talent and expertise tonight has really been appreciated. I also want to thank Evelyn De Jesus for joining us, Congresswoman Judy Chu for joining us at the top of the program, and thank you to everyone joining us in person or on demand. We look forward to you joining another Albert Shanker Institute event soon. Thank you, everybody, and enjoy the rest of Asian American, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander Heritage Month. Thanks all. Take care and good night.